Have you ever felt that this world is divided into two different worlds? Welcome, this is Bookspresso. I'll brew a strong cup of a book for you. After the story of the book is over, I will ask you the same question again. Please share your story in the comments. This is Hermann Hesse's novel, Demian. Our story begins with a boy, Emil Sinclair. Around the age of 10, he realized that the world was divided into two different worlds. One was the bright world where his father, mother, and sisters belonged. It was a gentle and orderly place. Church bells rang, and it was filled with warm hearts and the language of love. The teachings of prayer, worship, forgiveness, and good deeds flowed like a clear spring. Sinclair called that world his home and mother's embrace. It was a safe place where everything was clearly divided into right and wrong. The other was the dark world that led to the alleys and back streets outside the house. This place was noisy and dangerous. The shouts of drunk people and harsh curses were mixed together, and strange smells stung his nose. Terrifying events and mysterious stories happening in the darkness were endless. It seemed like a chaos where all taboos were broken and allowed. Sinclair was fascinated by the place, but at the same time he felt a deep fear. These two worlds seemed unable to mix, like oil and water. Inside the boy, the boundary between the two worlds constantly fluctuated. He felt an anxiety that he could not fully belong to either side. This meant that he was not a clean child belonging to the bright world, nor could he fully accept the dark world, but was a being on the border between them. At this time, the first crack occurred in Sinclair's life. It was because of the delinquent student at his school, Franz Kromer. Kromer began to threaten Sinclair, forcing him to lie. Sinclair had no choice but to obey Kromer's words. He stole an apple from his father's wallet and gave it to Kromer, and he lied to him. A heavy stone of guilt settled in Sinclair's heart. He was no longer a clean boy belonging to the bright world. He thought of himself as an ugly being who had now stepped into the dark world. I can no longer look my father in the eye. This sense of guilt completely consumed Sinclair. His anxiety gradually turned into extreme fear. He was tormented by nightmares every night, and the way to school felt like a road to hell. He felt a pain as if his existence as me was being torn apart between the two worlds. His heart felt like it was sinking into a bottomless abyss. And just then, a new transfer student appeared at his school. His name was Demian. Demian gave off a completely different vibe from Sinclair. He was much more mature and confident than his peers. Sinclair felt a strange attraction when he looked into Demian's eyes. Demian's gaze was deep and intelligent, as if he could see through everything. One day, Sinclair confided in Demian about what was happening to him. He spoke honestly about Kromer's threats and his own lies. Demian listened to Sinclair's story in silence. Surprisingly, Demian logically explained why Kromer's actions were unfair. He understood the fantasies and fears Sinclair had about the dark world, and Demian went to find Kromer and had a conversation with him. Sinclair could not know what Demian said to Kromer, but after that day, Kromer no longer approached Sinclair. Sinclair's life was miraculously saved by Demian. Sinclair felt deep gratitude and respect for Demian, but at the same time, he felt a strange distance from the one who had saved him. Demian was Sinclair's hero, but also an incomprehensible outsider. Demian felt like a mirror to Sinclair, reflecting his own inner self. Afterward, Sinclair spent another lonely time of growth. He grew distant from Demian and once again wavered on the boundary between the two worlds. He rejected all the order and norms of the bright world. He frequented bars and led a dissolute life with his friends. But his heart was empty. He wanted to find his true self, but he didn't know where that path led. The shadow of Demian was always cast in his heart. Demian showed him the way to find a new me, but the end of that path was still unknown. He began his lonely wandering once again. Then one day Sinclair saw a woman. She was so beautiful and shook Sinclair's heart to its core. Sinclair called her Beatrice. Beatrice seemed to be the only hope for Sinclair to escape the dark world and return to the bright world. But Beatrice was not a real being after all. He began to look into his own inner self through Beatrice. In his heart, there was always the image of Demian whom he admired. Sinclair now began to explore his own inner self. He discovered another me hidden in his heart. Finally, Sinclair met Demian again. Demian understood Sinclair's wandering and gave him an important teaching. It was the story of the bird breaking out of the egg. The bird fights its way out of the egg. The egg is one world. He who would be born must first destroy a world. This meant that Sinclair had to break his comfortable world and be born as his true self. Demian told him about a mysterious being called Abraxas. Abraxas was a god who encompassed both the divine and the demonic. This meant that good and evil were not separate, but coexisted within a single being. Sinclair no longer unconditionally rejected the dark world. He realized that he had to embrace even the dark side within his heart. He explored his inner self by drawing with Demian. He drew a bird that seemed to resemble himself, resembled Demian, and was breaking out of an egg. That painting now became a symbol of his destiny. Sinclair followed Demian and headed to Demian's house. There, Sinclair met Demian's mother, Frau Eva. Sinclair held his breath when he saw Frau Eva. Frau Eva was exactly like the ideal woman he had seen in his dreams. Her gaze resembled Demian's, and her voice resonated with Sinclair's soul. Sinclair felt a deep sense of peace and tranquility from Frau Eva. He felt as if he had finally found his home. Frau Eva quietly said to Sinclair, "Your destiny comes from yourself. Go on your way." Sinclair gained a deep realization from Frau Eva's words. He no longer needed external help. He was now ready to look into his own inner self and walk his own path. And then, the world was engulfed in the vortex of a great war. Sinclair and Demian were conscripted into different units. The two friends faced each other one last time and said their goodbyes. Amidst the shelling of the war, Sinclair was wounded and taken to the hospital. In the midst of the pain all over his body, he was losing consciousness. Just then he felt someone sitting next to him. It was Demian. Demian smiled as he looked at Sinclair. "Sinclair, now I'm inside you. Whenever you need me, you will find me." Demian kissed Sinclair's lips. It felt as if Demian's soul was seeping into Sinclair's soul, and Demian disappeared. When Sinclair opened his eyes, there was no one beside him, but his heart was at peace. Now he was no longer lonely. He realized that his existence as me was not divided into two worlds. In his heart, the bright world and the dark world, good and evil, all coexisted. Demian taught him how to find his true self. And now Sinclair was able to walk that path alone. He no longer wandered in search of Demian. He looked in the mirror and saw Demian's face reflected. It was his own face. Sinclair finally found his whole self. Have you ever felt that this world is divided into two different worlds? This was Bookspresso. Thank you.